Hello, welcome to the GlassFish webinar series. Today we will talk about web application development with Java EE 6 using GlassFish and NetBeans. In order to get started, we go to netbeans.org, download either the latest final release, which is 6.9.1 or 7.0 beta. Click on the download link, download the IDE, select the appropriate platform, download the all bundle, which comes pre-bundled with GlassFish Server Open Source Edition 3.1. Now on my machine, I have 7.0 beta pre-installed and I don't have GlassFish configured in here. So I go to Services tab, right click on Servers, say Add Server, select GlassFish Server 3.1, select Next. I can either specify a directory where GlassFish can be downloaded and installed, or specify a directory where GlassFish is already installed, in which case it automatically picks up the domain names for me. So this is the directory where GlassFish is pre-configured for me on my machine. I click on Next. It says the domain name. I take all the defaults and let NetBeans register the domain for me. So if I expand on servers, GlassFish server is registered for me. I right click and I say start. This is going to start the GlassFish server for me. Now, while it's starting the server, I can right click here and I can show you the properties. You can see this is the directory which we specified, the domain name. We can actually preserve sessions across multiple redeployments, and I will show a sample of that later today. And it also says to start my registered database server. So this is the log from my registered database server, and this is the log from my GlassFish server. So the server is up and running now. Expand it. Look at the applications. None is deployed right now. So let's go ahead and create our very first application and see what does it do. Go to Projects tab, right click, say New Project. I'm going to deploy a Java web application. Select Next, and I'm going to call it as Java EE 6 webinar. Click on Next. This project is going to get deployed on GlassFish Server 3.1, which is the one that we just configured. And this is also going to use the Java EE version of Web Profile Compliance. Web Profile is a new concept in Java EE 6 that is a subset of specifications targeted towards web developers. I can enable context and dependency injection either now, which is during the project creation, or later. Let's take the defaults here. Click on Next. I can add certain frameworks. Let's not worry about them now. We will deal with them later. And then click on Finish. So my project is now created. And it has a JSP page here, which says Hello World. If I right click on the project and I say Run, NetBeans is going to now deploy my project on the running GlassFish instance. And finally show the output page. Hello world, this is exactly what came to us in the template page generated for us. If I go back to the IDE and I, let's say, add 2 more exclamation marks. I save the page here and I go back to the browser and I refresh. Notice my changes are automatically visible to me right away. I just do edit, save, and refresh. NetBeans automatically deploys the project for me. I go back to the IDE, right click here, select the project properties, select run, and this is the property that enables deploy on save, which is automatically deploying the project for you. So that's a very simple Java EE 6 project that we created in just a jiffy. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is add a servlet to it. So right click here, say new, and we're going to add a new servlet to it. Let's say we call the servlet as test servlet, and we're going to add this in org GlassFish samples package. Now I can click on next. If you realize, it says adding information to deployment descriptor is optional. That is because most of the common cases in Java EE 6 do not require a web.xml now. So let's take this as default and click on finish. My servlet code is generated for me automatically. Now if I show you webinf, there is no web.xml here. In my servlet code, I have a @webServlet annotation, which actually gives the servlet name and the URL pattern. That's where it's accessible at. And then I have a process request method that is in turn being invoked from doGet and doPost. So let's go to the browser. And here we say test servlet. It gives me a blank page. It's not a 404 because the doGet and doPost methods are not doing anything. Notice the IDE automatically deployed the project for us. So back in the browser, I can uncomment the code that was generated by the IDE for me. I save the page here, and then you would see the deployment automatically happens. And I refresh the page, and the changes are visible to me instantly. So not just in index.jsp, but actually in Java classes, this instant deploy and save works as well. So that's kind of cool. Now let me show you another feature as we were talking earlier about session preservation. So I go back to my IDE here, and let me make some space here. Now in here, I'm going to use one of the features of NetBeans IDE called as code template. I created this code template. So if I type this keyword and I hit tab here, it automatically generates this piece of code for me. Now this piece of code is basically accessing a session attribute and then printing its value on the browser, and is also incrementing it. The idea is it keeps track of how many times the page has been accessed. So let's save this page here. And again, as I said, NetBeans automatically takes care of deployment for us. Go back to the browser, refresh the page, and here it says accessed one time. One more time, one more time. So accessed 3 times. Now I go back to the IDE, and let's say I modify the text here saying accessed again. I save the page, and the project gets automatically deployed for us. Go back to the browser, refresh the page. Notice the session count actually goes from 3 to 4. So even though the project has been redeployed, it did not reset to 1. It went from 3 to 4. Now if I refresh it again, it's going to be 5. So this allows your session data to preserve across multiple redeployments. Yet another feature how NetBeans makes you more powerful and effective with Java EE 6 and GlassFish.
Now let's add some database functionality to this application. So we go back to our IDE. Let's look at the services tab over here, expand databases. You can see our Java DB is configured over here, so you can look at the different properties of the database here itself. You can see the location of the database and the installation directory as well. Now there's one Jdbc connection that is automatically configured for us. So if we right click on it and I say connect, then it connects to the database and it shows me how what the schema of the database looks like. I expand the schema, look at the tables, and you can see there are a bunch of tables that are automatically created for us. Now if I want to generate a new table, I can do that too very easily. Right click on the schema, or actually on the tables, and I say execute command, and I'm going to create a new table over here. So let me borrow some code for that. I'm going to copy this DDL and go back to my IDE and paste it here. This is a very simple table called as friend. Got two columns, name varchar 30, not null being the primary key, and age int. So nothing fancy here. And then when I say run this command, you can see that it says SQL statement executed successfully. And you can also see that the friend information is automatically, the table is automatically added for me. Now I can also say execute command on this table, for example, And then for that, I would say insert into friend values, and then I will say specify a value, say Peter Humphrey, and give it a fictitious age. And let's say we add 2 more rows to it. One say 36, one say 37, and since name is the primary key, we will change it to another name here, John Klingen, and this also will change to another name called as Alexandra Huff. So these are all my friends who work on the GlassFish team. Thank you. Let's execute this command as well. So again, the SQL statements were executed successfully. Now I can right click on friend and I can say view data. And here it shows me the data that was exactly how we entered it. Now, if I want, I can generate JP entities from this database table. So go to the projects, right click here, say new, and I'm going to say entity classes from database. So if I select the data source here, I can say select the sample data source because that's the one that we added the table to. We select sample. It shows me all the tables that are available over here. I select friend because that's what I want to generate the entities for. Select on next. I take all the defaults over here. I mean, if you want, you can customize the class name and things like that. I prefer to put my entities in a model package. It's giving me some certain other values. It's going to generate the persistence unit for me. It's going to generate some named query annotations for ease of use, things like that. Let's take all the defaults and click on finish. So now I can expand my model package here and look at my friend.java class. So it's got all the standard Java, JavaX imports. It's got the standard annotations, the named queries using JPQL, and then all the fields and the methods. So very simple, okay? Now, how do we invoke this entity to actually retrieve the data from the database? Now, back in my test servlet, I can go here and I can say inject a persistence unit, which is going to give me an entity manager factory. Okay, and then I can click on the bulb over here and it's going to resolve the import for me. And let me resolve this import too. And entity manager factory. And I can resolve this import. Okay, once this import is resolved, I can go down to my browser here or in my code. From the entity manager factory, I can say create entity manager. On the entity manager, I can say create named query and see how code completion and integrated Java docs work seamlessly. I'm going to create a named query. Now, if I can go back to my friend.java for a second, I can look at these different named queries. I want to do select all the friends from the database. So I copy this named query name, go back to my test servlet, paste it here. So I'm going to create a named query. From the named query, I'm going to say get result list. And from the get result list, I'm going to say pass a specific parameter. So give me the first friend that I added over there. Okay, so that's my code over here. This I know gives me a friend. So I'm going to cast it for now. And let's resolve the imports. Once the imports are resolved, I'm going to print this value over here saying friend.get name. Okay, and once I do that, then I'm going to add some value over here saying friend name like that. Okay, let's save the code over here. So we save the code and the project automatically gets deployed for us. Yep, it looks good to us. And then we go to the browser and we refresh this page. Once we refresh this page, see our session data goes from 5 to 6, and here it says friend name as Peter Humphrey. So that's pretty cool. Just in a single line of code, by using some wizards in a few seconds, you could easily add database functionality to this. But that's not the fun part. Typically for your database interaction, you do all of that in an EJB. Now, one new functionality in Java EE 6 is the ability to bundle EJBs in a WAR file. Very simplified packaging, no specific deployment descriptors, anything of that sort required. So let's take a look at that. So let's add a EJB now. Back in my IDE, I'm going to right click here and I'm going to say new, and I'm going to say add a new session bean. Notice I'm doing this in a WAR file, which was not possible before Java EE 6. And I'm going to call this as friend EJB. And I'm going to put this in the same package or GlassFish samples. I can do stateless, stateful, and singleton is a new concept which allows you to have single instance of an EJB per application per VM. So, and then I can click on finish over here. So this generates my Pojo class, no interface, nothing, which is a new thing in Java EE 6 as well. And it specifies my add stateless annotation over here. That's all is required to make my a Pojo class and an EJB. So very simple. And all of this, with this, you get all of the declarative security, transactions, and all those value adds. That's pretty cool. Now in here, let's add a method called as public method list, say called as get list. And in get list, well, before we invoke this method, let's inject a persistence context here. So we say persistence context. This is going to give me entity manager. Notice here we are injecting a persistence context, not a unit, because EJBs are non-reentrant, so they are thread safe. If you're doing in Servlet, you have to inject a persistence unit and then get an entity manager from there. So let's use a shortcut to resolve all the imports. And then from the entity manager, I'm going to say same thing. So let's go to our Servlet instead. And we're going to copy this code here. We copy this, go back to our EJB, and we paste it here. And we're going to say return to this. Now here, we don't need create entity manager because that is automatically injected for us. So let's replace that code. So that's a simple method, okay? So let's save this file here. And if I go back to my Servlet, now here, instead of doing all this logic, I can go up here and say, by the way, go ahead and inject my friend EJB here and give me into a variable. And let's resolve the imports one more time. And down here, I can say, instead of all this code, I will say EJB, because this is returning a list to me. And then from the EJB, I will say get list. And then I will say get 0, okay? So you moved your code from Servlet to an EJB very simply and getting all the benefits of declarative security, transactions, things that I mentioned earlier. So let's save all the files. The project automatically gets deployed for us. We go back to the browser, refresh it one more time. The number changes from 6 to 7. This output stays exactly the same. So now instead of Servlet, your EJB is doing the business logic. So that's kind of pretty cool too. Another neat thing that you can do while you're doing EJBs is the ability to write simple unit tests. So let's say I have my friend EJB here, and in my for my friend EJB, I can say tools, and while I'm selecting create JUnit tests, that's the menu item that I'm selecting here, is going to create JUnit tests for me. Let's take all the defaults over here. You can see this is a standard JUnit test over here. It has a test guest list method over here. Is saying what method is to be invoked. Now, something new that has been added in EJB 3.1 is the ability to run EJB in an embeddable mode. That means within a VM. So that's what the API that is using to run the EJB test. And then it's using the portable global JNDI name, something new that has been added to EJB 3.1. Kind of cool. So all we're saying is expected result. We expect a result with a list of 3 names. We don't have the setup ready to run the test, but essentially here is what you will provide, how your list looks like, and then you will assert on them. Okay, so that's kind of simple. That's fun too. Now let's switch some gears and talk about Java Server Faces. So what I'm going to do is, in this application, I'm going to add the ability to support Java Server Faces framework. So I right click here, go to properties, It shows me the list of frameworks over here. I click on add and I select Java Server Faces over here. So select OK, and it shows me what server library that you want to use. So I want to use the one that is bundled with GlassFish. You can go to configuration and configure the pattern and things like that that you care about. And if you want, you can use Prime Faces that is automatically bundled with NetBeans. So let's click on OK here. And now Java Server Faces framework is automatically configured for me. So in this now, what I can do easily is add certain JSF pages and use our code that we have created so far. So now a new addition to JSF is the ability to use facelets as a templating language. So let's add a facelet page. So new, I'm going to go to other, select Java Server Faces, and I'm going to create first as a template page. So create next. Now I can call this page as template. Put this in a webinf folder because I don't want this page to be accessible outside to the public world. So click on select. Now these are several templates that are pre-bundled with NetBeans IDE. It shows you a visual representation of the page. You can easily create your own templates as well. But essentially this is a combination of CSS and XHTML. So let's say I choose a template with a header, a body portion and a bottom portion. So I click on finish over here. Here comes my template page that shows up over here. As you can see, it's just CSS and divs. Let's say in here, I say my application is my friends. And let's say I want to put this in an H1 tag. And see how NetBeans provides you code completion even in HTML. And let's say here, I want to do something within center. I want to say powered by GlassFish and NetBeans. Okay, that's kind of cool. So I save the page. Now you can't view the template by itself, so that's no fun. So let's add a page which will pull the data from the database and show me the list of friends. Let's do that. So I'm going to right click here, say new, go to other, Java Server Faces, and I'm going to select a Facelets template client. Call this as show because I want to just show the list of friends. And it's asking me which template should I borrow the template from. Which page should I borrow the template from? So expand webinf, pick template.xhtml, and select on finish by taking all the defaults. So here comes my show.xhtml page. Now if I show you template.xhtml, it has UI:insert, top, content, bottom, but they're all using UI:insert. In show.xhtml, I got UI:define with the exact same names. So the idea is whatever contents, whatever sections are not defined in the template page, on the child page or the using page, they will automatically be inherited from the template page. So let's save this page. Well, it's automatically saved for us. Go to the browser and here say faces show.xhtml. It shows me top, content, bottom. It's a very simple page, nothing fancy here. Now the fun starts here. So I remove the top and the bottom sections and I save the page. Go to the browser, refresh it. The moment I refresh it, because the top and the bottom sections are not defined, they automatically come from the template. And where is the template linked? Right here in the UI:composition element. So that's kind of pretty cool. Now in the content section, what we would like to do is pull the data from the database, and for that we already have a method in EJB. Now something new that is part of Java E6 is the ability to use EJB as the backing bean for a JSF that is enabled by context and dependency injection. So as we said in the beginning of the project, let's enable context and dependency injection in our project for now. The only thing you need to do in order to enable context and dependency injection, or CDI, the short name, is to just add an empty beans.xml file in the webinf folder. Right click here, say new, go to other, select CDI, beans.xml, click on next, choose the default name, the folder is webinf, that's good. Click on finish, and it generates an empty beans.xml file for us. We can actually take all the content and delete it. This is only a placeholder file for us. So save the file. And now in my show.xhtml, what I want to do is go pull the data from my friend EJB, which is over here. Now, in order for this EJB to be accessible in my show.xhtml, I need to add a annotation here. Call it as named. Now, named is a CDI annotation, basically saying this EJB need to be accessible in an expression language. So I can select the import over here, and I'm also going to make well, named should be enough. So I do named, and then all the methods can be directly invoked in my page itself. So in here I go, I'm going to say I want to display the value in a h:\data table. So I say take a data table. This data table takes a variable, say f, and is going to take the value from, if I use expression language here correctly, notice how it automatically does code completion for me. Friend EJB dot, and if I do control space, it completes the method for me. And let's do the code completion here. Okay, this is going to display the value in h:column. So let's do the code completion here, and then within the column what we're going to display is f:. I'm going to display the name, and I'm going to display the age. Okay, so let's save the page here, go back to my show, and I refresh, and boom, all the data that was in my database is now displayed right over here. So that's pretty cool as well. Okay, we created a Facelets based JSF application that is using EJB as a backing bean by the virtue of context and dependency injection. So neat. Okay, now leveraging this template functionality, we can easily create a new page that will accept the values in a form and feed it into the database. So how do we do that? Back in my IDE, I'm going to right click here, say new, create a new Facelets template client, call this page as create, pick the same template that I picked earlier, template.xhtml, select, and finish. It again picks the same template because that's what we just chose. Remove the top and the bottom section. I want to keep the content as is. If I go to my browser here, and here instead say create, so the same consistent look and feel shows up over here very nicely. All I need to do is replace the content section over here. Now for that as well, I have a code template. So if I type create, and I am going to hit tab now, which is going to expand into a bigger code. Tab, boom, the code gets expanded. Let's fix the import first. Once that is done, now this is a form with a panel grid with 3 columns: name, friend.name, and if the friend.name is not specified, then it gives an error. Similarly for the age, and here is calling friend ejb.create method, and see how it's giving a yellow mark over here saying this method does not exist. So you can see what the error is really over here. Okay, so now I can go back to my friend EJB here, for example, and I can say public void create method. I can create this method very easily. Back in my create.xhtml, it wants me to invoke this method, but we need to still populate the business logic. And see how hash friend.name is specified over here. So that means there is a bean which has to be annotated with @named. So remember our friend.java class? This was our JPA annotation, JPA class that was generated for us. All I'm going to do is add @named annotation here. Okay, I'm going to use a shortcut to resolve the imports. So this becomes my expression language accessible bean now. So if I save it here, and I also make it, let's say, a request scope. Okay, so I resolve the import for that as well. Now back in my create.xhtml, this friend.name and friend.age is taken care of. The JSF runtime will automatically instantiate the bean for me in the right scope. My method is really looking good now. I can select this, and it takes me to the right method. Now, however, in this method, I need to get the value of friend and create specify the values. or actually store them in the database. So here I'm going to say at inject, I'm going to say inject a friend for me. Let's resolve all the imports. In create, I'm going to say friend, let's say f2 equals new friend, and then I'm going to get the value from the injected friend over here. So friend dot get name, and I'm going to say friend dot get age. Now notice this constructor does not exist, so I can right click here. It says create constructor. Yes, please. So it creates a constructor for us, and here what we say is this dot name equals name, and then we say this dot age equals age. Okay, so the constructor is automatically created for us. Now back in my friend EJB, the error is gone. Let's save all the files. Another thing that I want to highlight in create.xhtml is here we are saying action listener is friend ejb.create, but the action is show. What that means is after this method is being executed, it's going to look for a file called as show.xhtml as a rendering the response. And if you remember from show, all we're displaying is a list of friends that are already added in there. So let's go back to the browser, refresh the page here. Now I got my name and age fields over here. Let's say I add another friend of mine, Adam Laftic, and give him a fictitious age of say 34. And I click on submit. And even then, I still get the list that was populated earlier. So let's look at our code. Back to our EJB. The missing piece here is we of course need to say em.persist, and we want to persist this friend. So we save it over here, and the project gets automatically deployed for us. Go back to the browser, invoke the create page again. My same friend still says the same age. Click on submit, and now he's correctly added. Pretty cool. So in just a matter of few seconds, you can create a simple proof of concept and start churning out application and do an iterative development very easily over here. Now, if you want to get a little bit fancy, then NetBeans also provides wizards. Let's look at them. So we say JSF pages from entity classes. It shows me the list of entity classes that are in my project. And I'm going to create CRUD pages for this entity class. So select the next, and let's say my session bean package, I'm going to put this in a bean package, and these are my JSF classes. I'm going to put them in a JSF package. It's going to do some code generation for me, and I don't care about the customized template part of it now, but I just click on finish. So now NetBeans has generated some code for me. The project is getting deployed. And then I go back to my browser here, and I go to the main page. And here it says, show all friend items. I select this, shows me all the same friends, their age, and now it provides me all the CRUDing capabilities very easily. I can create a new friend over here. So for example, I can create a new friend, say Mike Lehman, and give him another fictitious age of 38. And I say save, and then I can say show all friend items, and everything gets visible right here. So that's pretty cool, okay? Now let's switch gears one more time and show you some more functionality that comes as part of NetBeans. That is the ability to publish RESTful web services. So I go back to my NetBeans. Let's clean up some files here. Well, we don't need template XHTML anymore. Don't need this, don't need this, don't need this. We don't need the SQL commands anymore. We can take care of them. Okay, that's good. So right click here, and I'm going to say I want to generate a new RESTful web services. So I say other, and then I go to the bottom, I select web services, and I'm going to generate RESTful web services from patterns. I can select on next. All I want to publish is a very simple root resource. Click on next over here. It's asking me for the resource package, so I'm going to pick samples, and then I'm going to add resource over here. And let's say my class name is going to be simple resource, and I want the path to be simple. Okay, I can select the different MIME types. So let's say to begin with it's just text/plain. Click on finish. Now, NetBeans allows you to generate portable or non-portable Jax-Rs applications. Jax-Rs 1.1 specifically introduces the ability to specify the root resource URL as part of an application class. And that's the default in NetBeans. Now, if you don't want to add this class to your application, you can also specify this value in a web XML. Well, we will go with the default. In our case, resources is a URL where all the resources will be accessible to us. So click on OK. And NetBeans generate this simple resource class for us. It shows add path with simple annotation, with add path annotation with a simple path. And here is our method which says text/plain. We can replace the implementation of this method and we can say, for example, hello world, and we save the method over here. Okay, so the moment we do that, this file, the project gets automatically deployed. I can go back to my browser, and remember our path was resources and then on the path simple. When I type that URL, hello world comes to me. Very nice. Now back in my IDE, I can have multiple produces clause over here, which could then return either XML or JSON or some even other random data type for which you will have to write some code for it. This method is being invoked when I'm invoking HTTP GET. Similarly, this is getting invoked when I'm invoking HTTP PUT. It has a direct one-to-one correlation between all the HTTP methods. Simpler annotations are available. Let's build upon this application and see how we can specify certain parameters and then pass them around to our methods. So let's say to this RESTful URL, I want to pass an ID. And that ID, I would like to be passed to a method, say getText. And let's say this takes an int ID. Now I want to map this ID parameter out here in my method over here. So I say add path param, and I resolve the import first. And I say value, and then I say ID. Okay. So this, whenever my RESTful URL is being mentioned and I specify an ID over here, that automatically gets mapped over here. Now I'm passing an ID over here. Let's see how I can use this ID. If I go to my friend EJB class here, in here, I can add a method called as, say, it's a public method, returns string, and it says get name. And let's say this get name instead takes an parameter int ID. And all I'm saying is give me the name of the friend whose index is ID, identified by ID. So how do I resolve this is I say return, I first get the list, and I say get, and I say ID, and this I know gives me a friend, so I typecast it for now. And then from the friend, I get the name. Okay, so I just added a simple method to my EJB. Now back in my simple resource over here. Now in order for this to enable injection, in order for injection to work in a Jax-Rs resource, I got to make it as a managed bean for now. Now Jax-Rs 2.0 is already talking about simplifying all of these, working very closely with CDI. So this should just simplify. But for now, we're going to add a managed bean annotation over here. And this, by the way, is going to come from JavaX annotation package. So once I add, then this bean is managed by the container, and all the resource injection that should work will work. Here, I'm going to inject my friend EJB bean, call it as bean. Let's resolve all the imports over here. Down here, instead of just returning, say hello world, I'm going to say hello plus. From the bean, I'm going to say get name, and I'm going to specify the parameter. Okay, so let's save this thing over here. And then once the project is deployed, we go to the browser, and instead of saying resources simple, when I say 0, it says hello Peter Humphrey. This is the first friend that we added in the database. Now I can change the URL here to say 1, and it's going to point to hello John Klingon, second friend, so on so forth. I can change the ID, and back in my IDE, so the parameter that was passed in the URL is actually being passed to my method over here, and then the business logic is being invoked by injecting an EJB, which is then talking to the database. So very easily and very quickly, you can build a very powerful application just using NetBeans, Java EE6, and GlassFish. Now, one more thing that I would like to show you over here would be how to generate RESTful web services from your JPA entities. So we say new, and we're going to create RESTful web services from entity classes. So it's going to scan through my project, shows me all the entity classes that are available here. I select the entity class here, then I go next. It's going to do some code generation for me. Let's take all the defaults. Once I click on finish, NetBeans generates the code that is required. And now we can look at the generated code for us. So if I expand the package converter, it shows me friends converter. Let's see what's the error over here. Well, there's no error. I guess it just wanted us to open the file once, or actually, and NetBeans took some time parsing the file and then resolving all the compilation errors. Now, the cool thing is all of this code generation is completely automatic. You're exposing your JPA entity classes or the database as RESTful web services. A new node will appear for you. So you can say right click here and you can say test RESTful web services. Once you do that, then NetBeans is going to generate your client-side artifacts in order to invoke your RESTful web services. And these are JavaScript-based client-side artifacts. Now, another powerful feature of Jersey is that once you publish a RESTful web service, it actually also publishes a WADL file, which is Web Application Description Language. Let's look at this application first. So this is where our application.wadl looks like. So if I click on this, you can see this is my WADL file that is being generated for us. It's for this particular URL. It shows what resources are available, resource URLs specifically. Then it shows me the method name, that is get is available, the parameters that it will take, response, method, post, so on and so forth. So all the HTTP verbs that are supported by a resource are exposed very nicely in a WADL. Just like the way you have for SOAP-based web services, you have WSDL. For REST-based web services, you have a WADL. Now I can go back, actually here, I can go back here, I can click on friends, and here it shows me a nice interface. Now this code is all generated for you. You're more than happy to customize it for making your needs. So let's say I want to see all my friends and I want to see them in an XML format. I'm saying starting with 0, maximum 10 friends, expand level 1 if you have nested query, and this is the query that's going to get executed. So click on text, and then it's going to generate RESTful URLs for all my friends over here. This is the tabular view. So you can see friend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the 5 friends that we have added so far. I can look at the raw view. Now this is a raw XML that is being returned from the service very nicely. You can look at your headers. You even have a HTTP monitor, which is a dump of the HTTP traffic going back and forth between it. So very easily and nicely, I can also click on this URL, and then it shows me the entire XML representation. So very easily, you are able to generate a RESTful representation or expose your JPA entity classes as a RESTful web service. Now, if I go back to NetBeans, there are several other things that I could show here, but I'll just leave it for you to experiment with. So now I can click on new, I can go to other. Let's say I click on context and dependency injection. So you can easily create, different kinds of CDI artifacts that it provides. So you can create a qualifier, which allows you to easily do a type-safe dependency injection. Instead of using string-based patterns, you are specifying your actually type using Java type system, which is CDI qualifier. You can create CDI stereotypes, interceptors. Those all can be very easily created. I can go back to Java server faces. You can create your composite component and things like that. Now that would be a good thing to look at. So if I go to my web pages, for example, here, and I look at my, say, create.xhtml, now this is a panel grid, which is accepting the username, friend's name, and pass or age. Instead of, let's say I want to repeat this fragment at multiple places in my website. So instead of repeating it at multiple places, I can select this code over here. I can right click here, say refactor, and I can say convert to composite component. So now NetBeans is going to extract this code fragment, put it into a separate file, and that file could be then become my new JSF component that is specific to my application. So if I click on this, it's saying, okay, what do you want to call this fragment as? Let's say I pick the default over here. It's going to, the code fragment is going to go to into my resources/easycomp folder. And once I click on finish here, my code in the create.xhtml becomes very simple. It becomes easy colon out. Easy is my namespace over here. Now, if I look at easy colon out, it's being very clearly defined using facelets as a simple interface and an implementation. Now, in an interface, I could start passing parameters, which is friend name and friend age, and I can start binding different beans, and it can get really fancy. Back in my menu, right click here, I can go to other. So we looked at Java server faces. You can easily create your bean validations. On a bean, if you want to specify what are the constraints on the bean, such that the name may not be null or the age may not be more than 35. You can easily specify those kind of constraints on your bean, and then those are honored by your Java server faces and JPA layers very easily. We talked about CDI already. In persistence also, you can create a whole bunch of other things. We talked about RESTful web services from entity classes, JSF pages we talked about. You can also control JPA controller classes from entity classes very easily. You can go down. You can certainly create your Jax-Rs based web services very easily. So all in all, NetBeans and GlassFish provides a very comprehensive and a robust development deployment environment for your Java EE 6 needs. Now, one thing that I didn't show you that you may like to experiment with is right click here and you want to debug the application. Now, what that means is in your servlet, so for example, here, I could set up a breakpoint. And then I can say when I invoke this servlet, when I'm debugging this application, it will hit the breakpoint over here and will allow me to walk through the entire sessions and the variables and everything like that. So all in all, I think NetBeans and GlassFish provides a very comprehensive development environment and deployment and debugging environment for your Java EE 6 needs. And hopefully you found this webinar very useful.